Our lives are connected by silver threads of fate, weaving a complex tapestry of love, loss, and ultimate redemption in the dark. We follow these connections to find the stories that bind us all together. Hit subscribe now and become part of our shared cinematic narrative.
Know how this sounds? I know you're already thinking, she was tired, she was grieving, she imagined it. I would think the same thing. I spent 3 years being the most rational person in the room whenever anyone brought up anything close to the paranormal. I'm the one who rolls her eyes at ghost stories. I'm the one who changes the subject. So when I tell you what happened on the night of March 4th, I need you to understand that I've already argued with myself about it more times than I can count. I've already gone through every logical explanation. I've already tried to talk myself out of it. I can't. My dad died on a Tuesday, February 11th, 2 years ago. Heart attack, completely out of nowhere. He was 64. He walked 2 miles every morning. He ate oatmeal for breakfast every single day of his life. The doctors said it was genetic, said there was nothing anyone could have done. I've heard that so many times now that it sounds like a script, and it still doesn't help. He was the kind of man who remembered everything. Not just birthdays. He remembered the specific things you said in passing, things you'd completely forgotten about yourself. I'd mentioned in September that I was thinking of trying to learn to make pie crust from scratch, and by Christmas he'd have printed out 3 different recipes and tucked them into my stocking. That was just who he was. He paid attention in a way that made you feel like the most important person in the world. We had this thing, just him and me. He started it when I was really little. Whenever we said goodbye, even just hanging up the phone, he'd say, "You're my favorite chapter." I used to ask him what that meant when I was small. He'd say, "It means out of everything that ever happened to me, you're the part I'd read twice." I stopped asking him to explain it somewhere around middle school. By then I just knew. It was ours. He said it the last time we talked on the phone. Sunday night, 2 days before he died. We talked about nothing. Some problem with his gutters, a show I'd been watching, whether my older brother was going to make it home for Easter. Standard stuff. And at the end, like always, "You're my favorite chapter." I said it back. I always said it back. And then Tuesday morning, my brother called me at 6:47 a.m., and I knew before I even answered. The next year and a half is kind of a blur. I got through it the way you get through things, one day at a time, staying busy, crying in the car, pretending to be fine in the grocery store. My husband was patient with me in a way I'll never be able to fully thank him for. My daughter, who was 7 at the time, drew me a picture of a heart with my dad's name in it and taped it to the refrigerator. It's still there. I'm not taking it down. What I'm saying is, I wasn't in a fragile state when this happened. It had been almost 2 years. I was doing okay. I was actually doing okay. It was a Saturday night in early March. My husband was traveling for work. He does that about once a month, regional sales, usually gone Thursday to Sunday. My daughter was asleep. I'd stayed up later than I meant to, watching something on TV I'd barely remember, and I finally turned everything off around midnight and went to bed. I was asleep when my phone rang. I know it was 3:14 a.m. because I looked at the clock on my nightstand before I reached for the phone. My first thought, like any parent's first thought at 3 a.m., was something happened to my daughter. I grabbed the phone off the charger so fast I almost knocked the whole lamp over. Unknown number. Not my husband, not my brother, not my mom, who passed 4 years before my dad. Unknown. I almost didn't answer. I almost let it go to voicemail. I don't know why I picked up. Some instinct, maybe. Some feeling I can't explain. "Hello?" Silence for a second, and then, "Hey, sweetheart. It's late. I know it's late." The voice hit me like cold water. Deep, a little rough around the edges, the way a lifetime of early mornings will do to a voice. I sat straight up in bed. It sounded exactly like my dad. I mean exactly. Not similar. Not reminiscent. The cadence, the warmth in it, the way he always led with an acknowledgement when he was calling at an inconvenient time. "I know it's late. I know you're busy." Like he was always apologizing for taking up space, even though we always wanted him to take up more. I said, "Who is this?" It's cold out here. A pause. I'm sorry to call so late. I didn't know who else to call. Can you come to the door? My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I got up without thinking. I don't remember making the decision to move. I just found myself in the hallway, walking toward the front door, phone still pressed to my ear. Who is this? I asked again. My voice came out much steadier than I felt. I'm outside. I drove a long way. I'm sorry, I know this isn't how you do things. I didn't know what else to do. I reached the front door. I looked through the peephole. There was a man standing on my porch. Older, maybe late 60s. Big, broad-shouldered in the way my dad had been broad-shouldered, the kind of frame that never quite goes away even when the rest of you gets smaller with age. He was standing with his arms crossed over his chest, hugging himself against the cold, wearing a flannel jacket. His head was down. I couldn't see his face clearly. My first thought was, I am not opening this door. My second thought was immediate and completely irrational. It's him. I shoved that thought down as hard as I could. You need to tell me who you are before I open this door, I said into the phone. My hand was on the deadbolt, but I didn't turn it. He looked up, and I saw his face in the porch light. I made a sound I'm not sure I can describe. Not a scream, more like the sound you make when the air leaves your body. He looked like my dad. Not like a stranger who vaguely resembles someone, not like an aging celebrity double. He looked like my dad, except older. Maybe 5 or 6 years older than my dad ever got to be. The same jaw, the same way of holding his face, a little reserved even when he was trying to look approachable. Same heavy eyebrows. I took a step back from the door. I understand you're scared, he said on the phone quietly. I would be too. I'm not going to hurt you. I found something and I didn't know how to do this the right way. I tried to do it the right way and I kept not doing it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for coming here like this. Tell me your name, I said. He was quiet for a moment. My name is Owen, he said. My brother was Thomas. I think Thomas was your dad. I sat down on the floor of my entryway, just straight down, like my legs decided that was enough. I grew up knowing one thing about my dad's family history. He didn't have one. He was adopted at age 2. He grew up in a house in suburban Ohio with a couple who he described as fine people who did their best. And he had no siblings, no biological family he'd ever known or tried to find. He didn't talk about it much, not in a wounded way. More like it just genuinely wasn't a very large part of how he thought of himself. He had us. He had the family he built. That was what mattered to him. I knew there was a file somewhere, adoption records, whatever was available. I knew he'd looked, once, in his 40s, and hit a wall almost immediately. Closed records. Not enough information to go further. He'd let it go, or seen to. I had no idea anyone had been looking from the other side. How did you find me? I asked, still sitting on the floor. Your dad sent a DNA sample to one of those ancestry sites. Years ago, must have been at least 6, 7 years back. I didn't sign up for the same one until about 18 months ago. He paused. By the time the match came through, I found out he was already gone. Something cracked open a little in my chest. I'm so sorry, he said. And the way he said it, with the exact same heaviness my dad carried whenever he said something he really meant, I had to press my hand over my mouth. Why tonight? I managed. Why not send a letter? Why not? I tried. His voice was tired. I wrote letters, 4 of them. I never sent any of them. I found your mother's obituary, found your dad's, found you eventually. I've been trying to figure out how to do this for months. He paused again. Tonight my car broke down about 2 miles from here. I had it towed to a shop and the guy who helped me, I don't know, I just told him the whole story while we waited for the flatbed. He said, "Man, just go knock on the door." So I called a ride and here I am. I know it's 3 in the morning. I know. I was quiet for a long time. My dad, I finally said, before he died, did you know anything about him? Did you know what his life was like? Some things, he said. He sent letters too. to the agency when he was maybe in his 40s. They passed a few of them to me through a third party, anonymously. I didn't know who he was. I just knew what he wrote. His voice was rough. He wrote about his daughter. A lot. He was real proud. I was crying by then. I wasn't trying to hide it. "There's something I need to ask you," I said. "And I need you to understand that the answer matters more to me than almost anything right now." I stood up slowly and put my hand back on the deadbolt. "In one of those letters, did he ever write about something he said to me? A specific thing he always said?" He was quiet on the other end. "He wrote about a lot of things," he said carefully. "Did he write about a phrase, something he said when they said goodbye?" A long pause. "The chapter thing," he said. I stopped breathing. "He wrote about it in the very first letter. He said I could hear him swallow. He said he started saying it when you were small and he never stopped. Said it was the truest thing he knew." His voice was barely above a whisper. He wrote, "She's the chapter I'd read twice. I hope she knows that. I hope she always knows that." I opened the door. He was standing there with his arms at his sides, no longer hugging himself against the cold, like he'd let go of whatever he'd been holding on to. He was taller than my dad by maybe an inch. His eyes were the same shade of dark brown. He looked exhausted and scared and hopeful all at once. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I said. We stood there for a second, two strangers who shared something enormous neither of us had any idea how to hold. "Come inside," I said. "It's freezing." I made coffee. I wasn't going to sleep anyway. He sat at my kitchen table and I sat across from him, and we talked until the sky outside the window went from black to gray to the pale, thin blue of early morning. He told me about growing up in Michigan, about a wife he'd lost to cancer 8 years ago, about 2 grown sons who knew he was coming here tonight and had apparently been texting him the entire drive to make sure he didn't lose his nerve. He pulled out his phone at one point and showed me a photo, an old one, scanned from a print. The quality was a little rough, the colors slightly faded in the way photos from the 80s go. 2 little boys, maybe 3 and 4 years old, standing in front of what looked like a Christmas tree, both grinning the same slightly gap-toothed grin. The smaller one had my dad's face. I'd seen that face in 100 photographs. I knew it better than my own. "This is the only one I have of us together," he said. "It was with the adoption file. They gave it to my parents when they adopted me. I was 18 months. Your dad had already been placed with his family by then." He touched the edge of the photo with his thumb. "I didn't even know he existed until I was in my 30s. My parents didn't know either. They were told there was only one child." "He never knew about you," I said. "No." He slid the phone back into his pocket. "He never knew." We sat with that for a while. He had brought in a worn canvas tote bag he'd set by the front door, a small bundle of letters held together with a rubber band, the letters my dad had sent to the agency, the ones that had eventually found their way to him. He pushed them across the table toward me. "These belong to you more than they belong to me," he said. I picked up the top one. My dad's handwriting. I would know it anywhere, the slightly cramped print of a left-handed person who'd been forced to write right-handed in school. I read the first paragraph. "I don't know if this reaches anyone. I don't know if you're out there, but I want to say, in case it does, I had a good life. A really good life. I have a daughter who makes me feel like I got everything right even on the days I know I didn't. If you're reading this, I hope you had that too. I hope someone made you feel that way." I folded the letter very carefully and set it back down. "I need to call my brother," I said. "He needs to know about you." He nodded. "I'd like that, when you're ready. No rush." My daughter came downstairs at 7:15 a.m. in her pajamas with her hair going in 4 different directions and stopped dead at the kitchen doorway when she saw a stranger at the table. I looked at her, then at him, then back at her. "This is—" I paused because I didn't have a word for it. "Not yet. This is your great-uncle Owen," I said. "He's your grandpa's brother. We just found out." She looked at him for a long moment, with the completely unfiltered assessment of an 8-year-old. "You look like Grandpa," she said. He pressed his lips together hard. His eyes were bright. "Yeah," he said. I know, I've been told. She came and sat down at the table like it was the most normal thing in the world and asked him if he wanted some cereal, and he said yes, and she got up and got 2 bowls like she'd known him her whole life. I watched the 2 of them. This man my father never got to know, my daughter who carries half of everything my father was, sitting at my kitchen table on a Saturday morning in March, eating cereal, talking about what kind of dinosaur would make the best pet. And I thought, he wrote that I was the chapter he'd read twice. I think he meant it wider than I understood. I think he was writing about all of us, the ones he knew and loved and the ones he never got the chance to meet and the ones who would come after, all of it, every page of it. The whole long story of a life lived without knowing there was a brother out there somewhere, and a brother who spent decades carrying that same not knowing, and 2 strangers who found each other because a man sent a small plastic tube of his DNA into the mail sometime in 2017 and hoped for something without knowing what. He stayed for breakfast. My husband called at 9 a.m. and I told him to sit down before I started talking. Owen and I have talked on the phone every week since then. He came back in June with his 2 sons and we all had dinner in the backyard and my brother drove 3 hours to be there. And at some point during the evening, someone made a toast to my dad, and we all went quiet for a minute in the way you do when someone's absence is the most present thing in the room. His older son has the same jaw, the same eyebrows. It keeps hitting me at unexpected moments, a certain angle, a certain expression, and I have to take a breath and remind myself that grief and joy can live in exactly the same instant. I still don't fully understand the night it happened. I don't know why I answered the phone. I don't know what made him stop trying to be careful about it and just come to the door. I don't know why his car broke down 2 miles from my house and not 20 miles away. And I don't know what I believe about things like that, whether there's intention behind coincidence or whether we just find patterns because we need to. What I know is that my daughter has a great uncle now. What I know is that there are 2 little boys in a Christmas photograph who never got to grow up knowing each other. What I know is that my dad wrote letters to a stranger for years, talking about his life, talking about me, and those letters found their way home. I read them all, every one. At the end of the very last one, written about 6 months before he died, he wrote, "I don't need anything back. I just want you to know you were thought about. Whoever you are, you were always thought about." I hope, wherever he is, he knows the letter arrived. I keep coming back to the same image, my daughter, 8 years old, hair still messy from sleep, sitting down across from a stranger at the kitchen table and asking him if he wanted cereal. No hesitation. No suspicion. Just, "Here, let me get you a bowl." I don't know when we lose that instinct to simply make room for someone. My dad had it his whole life. He made room for everyone, not loudly, not in a way that called attention to itself, just quietly and consistently, the way good people do. He remembered what mattered to you. He showed up. He wrote letters to a brother he'd never met and never named, talking about his life, talking about me, asking for nothing back. He did that for years. That's not something you do because it's convenient. That's something you do because you've decided, somewhere deep down, that other people are worth the effort even when there's no guarantee anything comes of it. That's what I'd call decency, the real kind, the kind that doesn't need an audience. What I've been sitting with since that night is how much courage it actually takes to do what Owen did. He spent months writing letters he never sent. He drove to a stranger's house at 3 in the morning because his car broke down and a man he'd just met said, "Just go knock on the door." He stood on my porch in the cold with no way of knowing how I'd react, whether I'd call the police, whether I'd refuse to open the door, whether I'd look at his face and see nothing familiar at all. He came anyway. That's not recklessness. That's a different kind of strength. The kind that understands the risk clearly and decides the possible gain is worth it. He'd been carrying this for 18 months since the DNA match came through. 18 months of knowing my dad was already gone, of grieving someone he never got to meet, of trying to figure out the right way to reach a family that didn't know he existed. He kept trying. That matters. And I think about my dad too. The way he sent that first letter to the agency not knowing if it would reach anyone. The way he wrote, "I don't need anything back." That takes a particular kind of clarity, to act on what's right without needing the outcome to justify it. He'd made peace with the not knowing. He didn't let it make him smaller or bitter. He just kept building the life he had, loving the people in front of him, and quietly leaving a door open in case someone ever found their way through. I think about what I want my daughter to take from all of this when she's old enough to understand it fully. I want her to understand that how you treat people, consistently, without fanfare, when nothing is guaranteed, is the thing that outlasts you. My dad is gone, but Owen found him in those letters. Owen found me because of who my dad chose to be. That's cause and effect as real as anything I know. The things you put into the world don't disappear. They travel. They find their way. I also want her to understand that it's worth thinking carefully before you act. Not to talk yourself out of hard things, but to do them right. Owen thought about this for 18 months. That wasn't cowardice. That was him trying to honor something fragile. And then, when you've thought it through, you knock on the door. Even at 3 a.m., even in the cold, even when you don't know what's on the other side. My dad would have opened it. I know that without question. I hope I'm becoming someone who does too.